Hi, everyone. We're going back again to one of the older rums in my collection. And sooner or later, I had to go to Caroni or Caroni. It just depends on the accent you use in how to pronounce the word. The Trinis call it Caroni, but, I've always called it Caroni myself. So let's just pass with that. Now, everybody knows of Caroni now because of the extraordinary success of the single barrel bottlings that Velier did based upon a whole shitload of barrels that they found back in 2004. Now, this is almost like a rum legend now. Luca Gargano and his photographer, Fred Marcini, I think his name is, who has now passed away. They were running around the West Indies, and they had actually gone to Angostura to see if they could find anything interesting to bottle from there for their various collections. And Luca wasn't really very enthused with that. He just thought it was a bunch of column still stuff, and he wanted something more original. And then he heard that the Caroni distillery perhaps may still have some. But he went there, and in December of 2004, apparently, and he was let in, and to his surprise, he was able to see that there were thousands of barrels still moldering away in the warehouses. And then over the years, of course, he bought tranches of them, which have now become world famous, right? I mean, there have been articles written about that, about the valuation of this and the valuation of that, and how many barrels there were, and who got them, and all the rest of it. The truth of the matter, though, is that this isn't one of them. This actually was done by A.D. Rattray, who is a bottler out of Scotland that is more primarily known for whiskies. And this was on sale in 2010 in Calgary, and I bought 3 or 4 bottles just on a whim because the price was quite reasonable. At the time, I didn't know very much about the distillery myself. And it's a 13-year-old, so it was basically distilled in 1997, which was, of course, before the distillery closed in 2004. And then they let it age, not sure where. I'm going to assume it's Europe. And then they bottled it in 2010. And the Co-op chain of grocery stores in Calgary, this is a branded for Co-op, but I've seen others without the Co-op label. So certainly A.D. Rattray did more than that. And it's bottled at 4-6%. And of course, it is a 13-year-old rum. Now, at the time, we didn't know very much about what the Caroni profile actually signified. I thought it was really quite incredible. It was a rum that was different in the sense that back then it was 4-6%. It had tastes that were somewhat at right angles to the sort of profile that we were more used to at the time. One of the examples is that there's that fusel oil smell, and there's that sort of like tar, sort of like a heaviness. And that might have been a question of whether it was a heavy or a light rum coming off of the Caroni stills at the time. I'm really not sure. Truth to tell, we don't know very much about the sort of production process that made this. It just as easily be a column still rum or something a bit heavier from the lower plates. We don't know. However, even after all these years, I am still so in love with this rum. I mean, I've always liked Caronis myself. This is the first one I ever tried, and it maintains so much of what I liked about it. It's quite heavy. It has a dark, rubbery smell to it. There's a little bit of turpentine, wax, nail polish, acetones, that kind of thing. But behind all of that is a sort of heavy fruitiness to it that takes time to come out. It certainly is worth your time to let this one open up. And there are plums, and there are prunes, and there are dark grapes. You certainly are getting a little bit of brine and a certain molasses background to it, that's not entirely hidden by a fortunately not too excessive fusel tar oil smell. It's there, but it all comes together really well. And smelling it brings back just memories of what it was like to see this for the first time. And of course, in the years that followed, I did actually try a fair amount of Velier's Caronis. And of course, that brought back and snapped into focus what this was all about. The real question is then, does it taste as good as it smells? Well, let's try it, right? 4-6%, and this thing still is amazingly good. A lot of what comes off of the nose still ends up coming here. You are getting those dark fruits. You are getting a little bit of fusel oils. You are getting a little bit of tar, a little bit of turpentine, a little bit of tar, like black hot top on a hot day, which a tar machine is kind of like doing to repair the roads. You're getting all of that. more than that, a little bit of salt, a little bit of molasses. I mean, everything kind of comes together really nicely. And it's clear that this has been in an ex-bourbon cask, because you are getting some faint vanilla and charred notes that are really quite pleasant. Overall, even at 4 to 6%, this thing still succeeds like crazy. And I really, really loved it. Now, initially, and this is actually the same rum that I had written a review for on my own back in 2010. I didn't score it back then. And I had actually done it for Mike Streeter, who now has his own little independent bottling outfit. And he published it in the Rum Connection, which I thought was very nice of him. And, one of the things that I remember saying about it in the review, that this is a bit of a prime number of rum. It's indivisible by anything except you and itself. And the reason I said that was because it was unusual enough, and enough of a different rum from the sort of thing that we were used to. Remember, the new Jamaicans hadn't come into the picture yet, and we hadn't seen anything from Fiji or Australia, beyond, well, very little. So this took rum in an entirely different direction for me. And to this day, I still think Caronis are one of the great examples of what rum could be when done, by a bottler, or selected by a bottler who is looking for something quite specific. How much would I score this thing now, all these years later, given that I hadn't scored it back in the day? I'm going to say that this is an 85 point, 86 point rum, easy. Unfortunately, because it's been so long, you're not going to find 80 Rattray Caronis out there. Now, of course, you're going to see stuff from the 2000s. And, as we approach 2004 distillate date, you are going to know that we are hitting the end of the road, and there aren't going to be any more after that. But Shear probably has thousands of barrels of this stuff moldering around somewhere, and we are going to see more Caronis. But it's good to go back into the past every now and then and see something like this, which came back from the 1990s. When Caroni was still trying to make a living and trying to make a cash flow and payroll and what have you. They did go out of business eventually. Of course, it became too expensive, and they just didn't know how to market what they had effectively. But over and above all of that, I think it's still a great rum. And if you can pick up any of the ones, no matter that they are increasing in price, that's unfortunate. I bought this one for about, I think, $85 back in the day. It's worth your time to try it. It's one of the signature rums of the world. We are going to run out of it sooner or later, so whatever you can get, try to at least taste it. It really is worth it for that. I've got 3 bottles of this lying around in the background, and I will share it with anybody who wants to try Caroni for the first time. It won't be a Velier. It'll be completely different from that because, of course, different strokes, different folks, different distillers, different makers choose different barrels. But it has that signature Caroni profile, and I can't recommend it enough. It really is a great rum. That's it for today, and I hope you enjoyed this, and we'll talk about Caroni some more in some other point in the future. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.